the entire GA community, we sprang into action, and it was almost like we've done this before. It was smooth, professional. Everybody was helping. I had my sons, they were co-piloting and loading and unloading, but other guys would come over, and we'd unload that aircraft faster than anything you can imagine.
That's Laurence Balter of Maui Flight Academy, a pilot who's helping to lead a general aviation relief effort to help the victims of the Maui wildfires. Hello again and welcome on August 15th, 2023 to this Newsmakers edition of Aviation News Talk, where we talk general aviation with relevant news and flying tips for pilots and student pilots to help keep you safe. I'm Max Truscott. The Maui wildfire that started last week and destroyed the town of Lahaina has sadly become the deadliest wildfire in the U.S. in modern times. As of Tuesday morning, 99 people are known to have perished, and the death toll is expected to rise. Relief efforts are now in full swing, and in a moment, Laurence Balter will tell us what it's like on the ground in Maui and how general aviation has swung into action to help. Last week in episode 285, we talked about how to choose a flight instructor, which is one of the most important decisions you'll make when you fly. So if you didn't hear that episode, you may want to check it out at aviationnewstalk.com/285. And so that you don't miss next week's episode, go to whatever app that you're using to listen to us now. Take a moment right now, touch the subscribe key, or if you're using the Apple Podcast app, the follow key, so that next week's episode is downloaded for free. And this is a listener-supported show, so if you've ever learned something from this show that's helped you become a safer pilot, or perhaps to pass a recent check ride, think about what you might pay for a CFI for an hour of ground instruction and make a donation to help support the show. To do that, just go to aviationnewstalk.com/awesome to sign up to make a monthly donation, or to make a one-time donation, go to aviationnewstalk.com/PayPal. And of course, you'll find those links in our show notes. Now let me tell you a little about Laurence Balter. Laurence owns and operates Maui Flight Academy, which provides dual-lead flying experiences in Cirrus aircraft. He has over 13,000 hours of experience flying in Cirrus, and he was a Cirrus CSIP flight instructor for 18 years. And now here's our conversation with Laurence Balter. Laurence, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Max. I didn't think this would be the circumstances that I'd be on your show.
No, this is an unusual circumstance for sure. Well, you're right in the heart of the action going on in Maui. It's been about 6 days now since the wildfire started. What's the situation on the ground there now?
It's tenuous. It's changing all the time. We're getting updates. The road's open, the road's closed. Now there's only residents are allowed. I heard almost a riot today of people wanting to get in. And so they have a placard system, and I've been flying quite a bit. So I just been hearing tidbits of what's going on the ground, and it just magnifies the importance of what we're doing in the air.
And tell us about where you're located versus where the wildfire has been located.
So the island, and this is the mayor's words, we're fully functional, fully, open for business, even tourism. It's just the west side. So Maui, for those that don't know the geography, but most pilots do, it's two volcanoes that come together in a valley. This is why we call it the Valley Island. There's the West Maui volcano and the East Maui or Haleakala volcano. So it's the West Maui side that is Kaanapali, Kapalua, which a lot of people, vacation in. And I reside in the Wailea area, and Kapalua Airport is located in the Central Valley on the north side of the island. Kapalua Airport, which is the West Maui Airport, is on the west side, northwest corner of that west side mountain.
Got it. And what about services, electricity, cell phones? How are they working?
There is partial electricity now in places. They have some Starlink. There's partial cell service starting up. There's still a lot of people, of course, without electricity, without an ability to heat food, et cetera. But it's slowly coming, and we're hearing stories on the ground. And honestly, to get the best data, it changes all the time. And so you're hearing story that's, we call it the coconut wireless here in Hawaii. It just kind of passes through that sort of system.
Local word of mouth, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yes, correct.
Yep. So at what point after the fire did you realize that there might be a need where a general aviation airlift could help?
Well, it's hard to say there was a point. It was almost a natural progression. The fires were so strong, and of course, you could smell it even here in South Maui. We were ready to evacuate. We packed up all our valuables, all our belongings that we could in our 3 vehicles. My 2 sons were here, And so we were up until midnight and just waiting for the word. There were 3 hotspots. The worst one, of course, in Lahaina. It was so windy, Max. I mean, I had a week's worth of flying bookings. And we can talk about, a lot of pilots come to fly with me and fly around the islands. I canceled every single one of them throughout the entire week because Hurricane Dora was, I think it got, don't quote me on this, but it was like as little as 800 miles, maybe a little less to the islands from the south. And there was a trough. And so it was slightly pulling it to us. My concern, believe it or not, was not fires. It was hurricane. But I noticed the winds changing. We have the normal trade winds, which are the northeasterly trade winds. That switched to what we call the Kona winds. And then it shifted around a lot. The wind velocity, it's a normal day in Hawaii, especially at Maui, to have, winds at 30, gust to 35. That's usually in the middle of the day. Sometimes we'll get wind shear on approaches, and it's actually normal operations for us. We kind of know where the hot spots are and where to, carry a little extra power and so forth. But it was starting to get beyond that. And you could sense that the weather and the climate was starting to change. The winds were getting stronger to the point where I read reports, I don't know how accurate they are, that there were as much as, over 60, 65 knots. I was kind of checking the ATIS every once in a while, but it was localized. So I knew it wasn't a day to fly. The lenticulars, it was interesting. I took a photo of it, but I've never seen lenticulars like this. And I even kind of quoted on social media saying, wow, I wouldn't want to be up there.
And what, if anything, are you hearing about the origin of the wildfires?
So the long story short of it is that we believe that it was a down power line because in Lahaina, it's still the regular power line, whereas in Wailea and other areas, electricity is under the ground. So I've lived on that side of, I've lived in Maui now coming up almost on 23 years, 24 years almost. And we lived on that side the first 3 years. And every time I would drive back to the airport, I would always look up that hill and say, boy, I hope this thing doesn't light up one day. And in fact, about a week or two before my wife and I had to go to Kapalua, I was just looking at it and I told her, because the winds were strong, I knew that this was brush fire season. Oddly enough, the battalion commander of the Santa Barbara Fire Department, great guy, he flew with me a week ago, 10 days ago. And we were flying inbound on the north arrival here. And we were just chatting, it was kind of in mid-channel, so you can chat. Wasn't a sterile cockpit or anything. And I said, how well prepared are we for these brush fires? And he commented, he says, you guys aren't prepared for something serious like what we get. And it was in passing commentary. And, sure enough, there you go. These guys with they're in the hangar next to me, the Windward Aviation, they have the rescue helicopter, search and rescue, and also fire suppression. These guys were overwhelmed. They worked their tails off, and it was starting to get dark. The smoke was starting to get much stronger, and you could smell it everywhere throughout the island. So we were all worried as the night started to take place. So we started personally packing our belongings and ready to evacuate the house. That's the first time we've ever really been, worried about this. This could be the one. And then it was just pockets of data that we were hearing about what was going on. We really didn't know until the next day what was happening. And then we started seeing TikTok videos and so forth. And then the social media was really what was letting us know, because cell service went down, power went down. So there was essentially no communication from that part of the island. At that point, the group texts, we have very small community in Maui, general aviation pilots. Everybody knows each other. And we started getting on the group text, and we're like, okay, we got to fly over there. We know we're going to help out. But then it was a question of Kapalua Airport, which most pilots don't know, but we get asked this a lot. It is the only airport in the state that does not accept federal funds. This airport, it's 3-letter identifiers, Juliet Hotel Mike, which stands for John H. Magoon. John H. Magoon used to be the president and CEO of Hawaiian Airlines. They built that runway decades ago for Hawaiian Airlines, and it was a private strip. And then when Hawaiian went bankrupt in the early 90s, that was one of the assets that they had to sell. So the state came in and bought the airport. When the state bought it, there was a deed restriction put in by the local community and the county and into what we call the Hawaii Revised Statutes. And it literally says in there, no general aviation, no helicopters, no jets are allowed to operate at this airport. You must be Part 135 and you cannot be on the ground for more than 45 minutes. That's in the statutes. So it was an untouchable field. And I knew that we needed to get approval to operate into that airport. And so I texted and called the airport operations people in Kahului, the airport manager, and we got the verbal okay to start operating in there. From that moment on, everything kind of happened in a hurry. So we started flying. We waited a day because the winds were still super strong even after the fire, as it was kind of being put out. And I knew we did not want to fly in those conditions because everything was still tenuous. But it was the following day that we rallied into action. Maui Brewing Company, which actually owns the Cirrus that I lease, he's one of my students and very large social following. They have a factory here in Kihei. And so they use their factory and warehouse to bring in supplies. And so we drove over there, and then they started driving trucks to our hangar and then to the fire station, and everybody just started loading up. No questions asked. Just they said, how much can you take? And we just filled it up. Eventually we said, you know what, this going in and out of our security gate is kind of a mess. Let's move everything to the airport fire department. And so the fire department was fantastic. Those guys could not be deployed because they had to stay at the airport, right? They're the airport fire departments, but they were very helpful. And they had these large scales that the helicopters use. And so they would throw in supplies and bag stuff. They were 500-pound bags, there were 1,000-pound bags. And then they would ask us, and they had shopping carts, which I don't know where they got, but some were from Costco. I don't know if they just took them or this Costco let them use, but we would load up based upon our payload capability. We'd pull up the aircraft, load it, shut the door, off we went. Flight in the Cirrus is 12 minutes, about 15 minutes in the Cessna. And we get over there. There were the airport fire department there, just unloaded. They brought their carts. We were on the ground 5 minutes. So I did, I think 5 or 6 sorties the first day. And about, I'm going to say on average, maybe 6, 7 Maui aircraft. And there were a few other outer islands that came out to help. Plus, the air tour helicopter companies came in. I mean, it was like an armada. It was so, Max, I'll tell you, it was so effective of an operation. They actually asked us to slow down and stop because they were getting so many supplies that we were kind of like shocked, like, really? I mean, we can handle this, guys. You know, they were worried about parking but everybody, the entire GA community, the helicopter pilots, we sprang into action, and it was almost like we've done this before. It was smooth, professional. Everybody was helping. I had my sons. They were co-piloting and loading and unloading, but other guys would come over, and we'd unload that aircraft faster than anything you could imagine. So nobody kept count the first day. It was just kind of like, just go, because people, were suffering. Second day, they started counting. So they counted 57 operations on the second day, and then 36 for the third day. And I don't know what they are today. They're starting to taper off. But we estimate that we brought over 100,000 pounds of supplies in, less than 24 hours. And we got a call middle of the afternoon that there was 100 pounds of insulin stuck at Kona Airport. And so I heard the airline rejected it. I don't know all of the details. All I heard was, can you get to Kona and pick the stuff up? Now, I was taking a break. So Garrett from Maui Brewing Company and the owner of the airplane, he flew and picked it up and delivered it to Kapalua. So we know for a fact that there are people alive today because of that insulin delivery that took place. Then as things, a lot of the critical items we would do, like, for example, on several of the trips, my wife would jump out of the airplane when we got to Kapalua. She'd go up to the security fence. There were people at the security fence, members of the community. And she'd say, what do you need? And, we need diapers. We need, all these different things, flashlights, batteries, and this, that, and the other. So we didn't even write it down. We just took it by memory. Then we went out, we'd communicate to the staff on the ground. If we didn't have it, somebody would go get it. One of the things that we needed to deliver was a specific oil for electrical generators, which they didn't have. And we had people running all around town, Napa, auto parts, you name it, trying to locate this. And there was like one of the hardest things to locate. There was like one retailer left that had 5 quarts of this specific oil, whatever it was. I grabbed it and off I went. In the meantime, Garrett from Maui Brewing was essentially assembling a caravan of trucks. And because of, they're used to shipping things to the other side of the island and so forth, he was able to rally his troops and effectively start bringing stuff over. Then the road closed. It's another sad story where they opened it for a little while and people were stuck. We had there was a customer that flew with me just prior to the fires, and he was staying at the Ritz-Carlton. And I get a text and he says, I've been stuck in my car for 42 hours. Can you fly and pick me up? And this was before we started flying out there because the winds were too strong. And then there was a TFR as well in the Lahaina. At first, the TFR was huge, not huge, but it was a large area that covered everything. And then the FAA started consolidating the TFR. But he's like, how do I get home? How do I get to the airport? And so we were helping him out. So I don't even want to go into the sad stories. I saw video footage today, Max, that it was not even shown to the news agencies of one of our pilots who actually is part of our community, but he's also got a boat operation. And so he would deliver supplies via boat, and he went and walked. He told me this, there were guys they were looting, they were stealing ATM machines, they were carrying weapons, they were dressed in masks. I mean, they were basically looting the place. And then he showed me other footage of literally dead bodies on the ground in Lahaina. But he happened to be in New York during 9/11. And he said, on the ground, this is worse because nobody had anywhere to go. At least New York had, immediate access to emergency rooms and all the other things that he says, there was nothing because there was no power. There was nothing. So from that perspective, the stories are heartbreaking. But we were effective, still are effective. We've been flying missions back and forth. So what I did is I realized if this has to be ongoing, we can't fund this thing completely out of our own pocket. So we started a GoFundMe for just avgas donations. And so we're spreading it. I told all the pilots, we were on the radio. Some guy I've never seen before from Oahu, I called him on the radio on Unicom and I said, hey, Cessna 586, here's my email. Send me your fuel receipts. We've been collecting money. I just got home. I don't even know how much I collected so far. But when I left this morning, we're already at $30,000 in avgas donations. So we haven't dispersed those funds yet because we need to get legal clearance to send those funds out. And so the AOPA attorney in Hawaii, Don Machado, told me today that he's talked to the local FAA office and they're looking at issuing a waiver because apparently from a good friend and client, Brad Pierce, who is kind of a famous Cirrus pilot that flies around the country all the time. He said, be very careful because there have been a lot of pilots who've been violated in these kinds of situations for accepting funds. So we're trying to dot the I's but we're also trying to be very effective with what's going on. But it was almost, no questions asked, just let's go do it. Tell me what you need. Let's go. And Max, this is where, and I said this today on NBC News, they were out here at my hangar this morning. I said, GA, General Aviation, is the shining light when things are dark. And this is a perfect example of it. And, the Haiti effort, the relief effort, I know a lot of pilots went out there, a lot of Cirrus owners, a lot of Cessna owners flew out there. And, we're here to help the community. It's part of what makes us who we are, General Aviation. And I remember about maybe 3-4 years ago, in a meeting with the airport managers and staff at Kapalua Airport. And about 10 years ago, was it 10 years? Whatever it is, I used to be on the Commissioner of Transportation Board for the state of Hawaii. I would always say this at meetings where we had to justify general aviation funding and access and don't kick us out sort of, conversations. And I said, one day there's going to be a hurricane or a tsunami that affects this island. And the only way we're going to get medical supplies is with general aviation. Never did I imagine that it would be an inferno. That was not even on the list. But this is where we shine and we help the community. And it's heartwarming for all of us because we know the impact that we're having. And it's great.
So take us back just a little bit. Help us understand what is the situation with the roads that led to the need for this GA airlift. Obviously, you've got relatively few roads. How many are there, and are they passable? And was this indeed the critical reason that the airlift existed?
There's one road, and it goes around the perimeter of West Maui. And that road has always been problematic, mostly because of drunk driving accidents. On a typical month, there might be one fatality, of drunk driving on that road. It's a 2-lane highway. Essentially, it's the only way to access that side of the island. The road goes around the other part. We call it the northwest part, the Kapalua Road, which is treacherous for those uninitiated to it because it goes down to 1 lane in some places. So it's the only way to access because of the steepness of the mountain. Whenever there was a fatality, they'd shut down that part of the road. There was no access. And having lived on that side for 3 years, there have been many times where we were stuck at Walmart till midnight because they have to fly the coroner in from Honolulu. And, that takes time and nobody's in a rush and they have to do their thing and then they can reopen the road. So in this case, the road goes right through Lahaina. I have not been on the road, so I cannot comment on it, but that is the only way to access it. There's no other highway through the mountains around. And there's beautiful valleys that are inside that even are treacherous for hikers. So it's an isolated community, roughly 10,000 people. At least when I lived there it was 10,000 people. But locals know this on Maui, that whenever you go to that side of the island, there's always a risk you're going to get stuck overnight or for many hours.
So it sounds like the road has been open and shut multiple times over many days. What are some of the different reasons the road has been impassable?
The one that I know of was they opened it. People were emotionally distressed that lived there. They were granted access. Family members came to maybe rescue other family members, and somebody ran this. Again, I'm relaying the story. I don't know all the facts. Somebody ran across the road. They were such an emotion. They got out of the car and wanted to go run to see their house or their grandma's house or whatever it was. Didn't look both ways and was hit and killed. And so they shut down the road. And then they opened it again. I've been hearing different stories that they opened it to only residents. Well, there was first emergency vehicles, and then government official vehicles, and then residents. And now there's a placard system, which I heard they had to close it again because everybody was complaining. And so I just been hearing things.
Okay. But I guess it sounds like the main reason this area is inaccessible is because the road keeps opening and closing. Was it also closed because of the fire at some point in time? I guess the fire swept over the highway?
Yes, it did do that. And there's, of course, still, and I assume now it isn't, but there was the fire risk that there was another fire in Kapalua that started, I think it was on day 2, and Kapalua was evacuated. So they shut down the road again. In the meantime, we're just flying missions, and we were just hearing third-hand knowledge because remember, there was no cell service. There was no way to communicate. So we were hearing things on the Coconut Wireless and then seeing posts eventually on Instagram, like Maui News Now and so forth of updates. But there's a lot of bureaucracy now. Again, I'm hearing stories that, FEMA's here. We saw them bring in a C-130 and a 757 of some contract operators, Linden and I think Pacific. So FEMA is here, but there's all these forms and you have to have ID, and these people don't have IDs. And there's this incredible bureaucracy. And then people are like, well, I need diapers, I need medicine, I need this, I need that. We would just hear this, go get it, bring it. There was no questions asked. People were paying things out of their pocket. There's a line I just saw today at Costco, probably 150 people long of shopping carts, people donating goods, and then they're going to the different locations.
So how many different aircraft do you think have been involved to date, both airplanes and helicopters and so on?
Well, helicopters, I'm going to say at least probably 10. and in the beginning, and then it tapered off. And then as far as single engine GA, Maui, I would say there were 7 active. Then we had some outer islands coming in, maybe once, maybe twice, a couple of times, whatever it is. There were some supplies that were donated at the state capitol in Honolulu. And so a lot of guys flew that over. So I would say GA wise, under 20. And then helicopters, when I landed on the first leg, there were 4 EC-135 helicopters on the ground and from the air tour companies. So it was great to see them there. But we were getting things done, and we were so effective. Eventually, on day 3, they asked us to just, hey, slow down, stop. The firemen were actually, there was eventually a leader to the fire department on both sides that text me to text the group. He says, guys, we want to take a pause. We have so much stuff now. We don't know how to sort it, where to go, and so forth. So then we started taking, pilots, we want to fly. Come on, let's get this going. So we started getting personal requests for families. And so we come in and write on the box, this is for the such and such family. That's for this. So we just kept flying and set that stuff aside, and people would come to the airport and pick it up. And then again, my wife would go to the fence and say, hey, what do you need? And we'd go back and we go get it. And then everybody else, I'm not just saying it's just us. It was a team effort, and it was efficient.
Sure. So we're talking here on Monday evening. How many days have you been flying, and roughly how many flights do you think you've flown in over that time?
I'd say at least 10 sorties, maybe. I lost track after once I jumped in his airplane. So we're just going back and forth, and then other guys throughout the day. So 3 full days.
And at this point, how much longer do you think the airlift may continue? You said you think it's winding down a little bit.
That's a great question. We're skeptical because of what's going on in the ground. And there are, for example, my wife just told me on the ride home that apparently they have, one of the things we were carrying, because I love to carry diapers, right? They're light, they're bulky, but we could fill the airplane with them. So I was the diaper express for most of the day. But what we were hearing is that, they have plenty of diapers in the FEMA airlift. The problem is nobody knows where, they can't get access to it. They need these forms and these moms just need diapers, and the babies need diapers. So people were coming to the airport to pick up the diaper boxes because they knew we'd get it there in time. So it's fluid. It has certainly slowed down. I don't know how much longer. We are going to do some runs in the morning tomorrow. And there's been requests from private families for certain things. At my last trip today, we delivered 20 Costco chickens. It was the first hot meal that some of these people had. So we were the Chicken Express, our last leg.
That's great. Well, and for people who are listening who might want to help, obviously, I'll go ahead and include a link to the GoFundMe you have for fundraising. Any other ways that pilots who are listening might be able to help with your relief efforts?
That's the one that I know. That's why I set up, because there's nothing specifically for it. But we are having, it's even on there, that pilots I don't even know of that are from other islands that have come. If they're listening to this, they can submit their fuel receipts to me, and then we will disperse it. Just send me your receipts. So we have not dispersed the funds yet. We will, but we're just waiting for legal clearance to get that done. And we think we'll be hopeful
That's great
on that very soon. Whatever's left over, just so that donors know, if there are funds left over, we will donate that to either the Maui Strong Foundation, or there's 3 very strong or good foundations here that are the real deal, charity-wise, that we're going to send the overflow money to.
Got it. Well, thanks so much for sharing about the relief efforts. But go ahead and just give folks a feel for what would a more typical day be like for you working with Maui Flight Academy? How do you spend your days?
Yeah, well, I'd look forward to getting back to the normal day. Primarily our business is visiting pilots that come to Maui that want to fly the islands. I'd say a very strong percentage of it are Cirrus owners that come in, and many pilots will be familiar with a lot of my angle of attack promotion and training. The videos, even the FAA has used our training videos on some of their AOA promotion material. So it's up for thousands of pilots. It is their first experience to use angle of attack. And then for many pilots, it's their first Cirrus experience. But we were featured a few times in different places. March 2020, when everything was locked down, AOPA did an article on us. But a lot of guys call us, hey, I want to rent an airplane. we don't allow other people to rent the Cirrus. We do dual lead experiences. A lot of guys come for BFRs, for instrument proficiency checks. We'll go fly around, to the volcano on the Big Island. We've had many exciting flights around the volcano. We fly to Honolulu and go into, the class Bravo there. And so it's great for a lot of guys that say, you know what, I don't want to worry about all these there are some unique things about flying in Hawaii that these pilots are capable of doing, but you know what, they're just here. They just want to look out the window and have fun. And, maybe it's the bucket list where they want to put the 50th state in the logbook. We fly by the tallest sea cliffs in the world, the Molokai Sea Cliffs. We do a touch and go on a beautiful little strip on Molokai, which is right on the ocean. We'll fly to Lanai, have lunch on Lanai. We'll head out, like I said, to the volcano, and then Oahu, we can fly the North Shore of Oahu, or what we call the Pearl Harbor attack route. So, I was all inclusive before, as far as like private training. There are Cirrus owners today who are probably listening to this that had their very first introductory flight with me. There are some Cirrus owners who took their first Cirrus flight with me and now are Cirrus pilots or owners. Or they'll come in, I do spouse training, so they'll want their spouse to get some fun training. And then a lot of these guys come and they want to practice their crosswinds. And I can guarantee 90% of the year, you're going to have crosswinds here that are normal to us that most guys wouldn't fly in. So it's a great training ground for that.
And as we start to wrap up here, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yes. Those that are listening, pilots that live in communities that are, their airports are under threat of closure, I highly recommend that you take the example that what we're doing here in Maui to your local community and the community meetings that they have and public forums to fight to keep the airport open. That this is what general aviation, this is when we shine and we become the shining light when things are dark. And I wish you all the best to keep all those airports open out there.
Laurence, thanks so much for being with us here today and sharing all of your experiences. And thanks for all the fine work that you're doing in Hawaii. Thank
you very much. Aloha to everybody.
My thanks to Laurence Balter for joining us today. You can find a link to his GoFundMe project on his homepage at MauiFlightAcademy.com. He also runs a Facebook group that you can join called Pilots and GA Enthusiast. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend who you feel might enjoy it too. And if this is your first time listening to the show, please touch the subscribe key, or if you're using the Apple Podcast app, touch the follow key so that future shows are downloaded for free. And if you have any feedback or comments about this show or anything else you'd like to share, go to aviationnewstalk.com and click on Contact at the top of the page, which will send your email directly to me. So until next time, fly safely, have fun, and keep the blue side up, and remember that you can always go around.
You can always go around. If it don't look right coming down, don't wait until your side's baby sliding upside down.